Hello and welcome to Direct Supply's Continuing Education webinar series. Direct Supply offers monthly webinars on a variety of topics throughout the year. The topic for today is mobility training, the missing link to improved outcomes and fall reduction. My name is Robin Malik and I will be facilitating today's meeting. This webinar includes one nursing contact hour, one physical therapy contact hour, one occupational therapy contact hour, and one complimentary administrator CEU approved by the NAB. If you have questions during today's presentation, please use the chat feature to submit your question. Send your question to me, Robin, the host, and we will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. Please note, the information contained in this presentation is intended to provide general information but not advice about certain regulations and initiatives. This is not intended as legal or other advice, and each situation may vary depending on the particular facts and circumstances. You should not act upon this information without first consulting with qualified legal counsel. Today's webinar will be presented by Kate Reed from Resistance Dynamics. In addition to being an ACE certified senior fitness specialist, Kate is a registered dietitian with a master's degree in nutrition and physical fitness from New York University. She began her career in corporate fitness at Mobil Oil and Bristol-Myers Squibb Company. She has been teaching, writing, and prescribing healthy eating and exercise programs for over 25 years. Today, as CEO at Resistance Dynamics, Kate is delighted to be empowering older adults to regain strength and balance, to fall less and live more with her innovation, the Move More Mobility Trainer and Progressive Programming. And now, please welcome Kate.
Thanks so much, Robin and Direct Supply for the opportunity. I am absolutely thrilled to be sharing some valuable new insights with you to help improve outcomes and reduce falls safely, quickly, and effectively with mobility training. I'll be sharing the science behind why it works and how to apply the principles in 5 simple steps. Before we get started, I have to confess 2 things. I love science, and I love helping people. As a nutritionist and exercise physiologist, my whole career has been about helping people. And 4 years ago, I was lucky enough to fall into the senior living space, pun intended, by creating the mobility trainer. Before we launched, we started performing pilot studies to make sure we were helping people. I am super grateful to the innovative PTs and doctors who helped with the first studies and continue to help. I know some of you are on the call right now, and I want to extend a personal thank you because it's your help and dedication is the reason that we're here right now. So we saw benefits and we launched our product. I began teaching mobility training classes and was absolutely blown away with the range of motion and strength gains I was seeing and what participants were telling me they could do on their own, like coming down the stairs, getting in and out of their son's SUV without any help. And just this week, I was teaching class, and a participant in my class named Phil, who had a stroke and it affected his right side. He has trouble speaking. He's got his right arm in a sling. And when we started 6 weeks ago, his right leg could barely move. And Monday this week, 6 weeks later, his right leg was moving almost as well as his left. The clinical exercise specialist, Mallory, who works at the same community and teaches classes, shared that one participant, Rock, who uses a wheelchair to get around, was able to get up from his wheelchair so much easier to transfer to the new step on his own. So it's these benefits that we're seeing with people who are pretty hard to reach that really fuels my engine. I always need to understand why things work and why we were seeing these benefits in such a short time. So I started researching, and the information I'm presenting today is a culmination of 4 years of connecting the dots between the study results, teaching, and the research that I've been digging into. The reason mobility training works is incredibly simple. Are you ready? So by training joints through a full range of motion, we're able to improve joint flexibility, strength, and balance safely, quickly, and effectively. So we'll start by diving into the science of mobility, and we'll look at the 3 phases of falls. So please put on your detective caps so we can connect the dots together to understand why and how mobility training works to help reduce falls and improve the lives of older adults that we serve. So we're focusing on mobility because any movement we make in life depends on our mobility. If we want to engage in life, we need to move. And mobility is the ability to move safely. It determines our level of independence, our quality of life, and fall risk. It allows us to stand, sit, walk, stop, turn, climb, and stand on one leg. And a lot of people scratch their heads when they hear stand on one leg, but 40% of the gait cycle when we're walking, we are standing on one leg. And with age and inactivity, we see functional mobility decreasing. 40% of 60 to 74-year-olds have trouble with functional mobility, and that increases to 65% of 75-year-olds. Of those, 7% are severely challenged. And this next statistic really startled me. 22% are profoundly challenged and require constant help with self-care and mobility. We know as mobility decreases, fall risk goes up. Each year, that means 1 out of 3 65-year-olds will fall. 70-year-olds, it's the leading cause of fatal injury, and for those 80 years and up, 50% of them are going to fall. So there's an obvious need to help improve the health and mobility of older adults. So let's take a look at the mobility components that decline with age and inactivity. Mobility is all about ability, and it's the ability to exert force. That's our strength. It also helps us withstand stress and strain. And research shows that from the ages of 30 to 70, about 30 to 40% of overall strength is lost. And with weak legs, it makes even the most basic task difficult, if not impossible, to perform without help. Power is a subset of strength. Power is the ability to use strength quickly. And we may notice that some of our older adults can still get up from a chair, but it takes a long time. So they still have the strength to rise from the chair, but they've lost the power. So power is more closely associated with successful performance of activities of daily living. Endurance is also another subset of strength. It's the ability to use a low level of strength over a longer time. We need endurance every day when we're out running errands, doing housework, out gardening. All the activities that we do throughout the day requires endurance. One of the endurance muscles that fails on older adults often and increases the risk of fall is endurance of the dorsiflexor muscles. Those are the muscles that lift the toes. And when those muscles fatigue, it increases the risk of tripping over their own toes. And tripping accounts, I think, for a conservative estimate, is about 40% of all falls. Flexibility is another component, and it's the ability to move joints through a full range of motion. And that ability also decreases, and without being able to move joints through that full range of motion, mobility suffers. The cause for this decline is aging and inactivity. So sarcopenia is the age-related loss of muscle and strength. Lots of people are very surprised to hear that this process does not start at 60 or 70 years of age. It starts at 30 or 40 years of age. Research shows that we can actually reverse strength, balance, and flexibility declines, so I would say that more of this decline is due to inactivity. When we're inactive, joints become stiff, muscles begin to shrink with inactivity because you use it or lose it. The neural systems that activate muscles and the sensory systems responsible for balance wither away as well. That's why we end up with a loss of balance and less strength and poor flexibility. So let's dive into mobility systems that are dynamic and ever-changing. So we have our hardware system, which consists of our musculoskeletal system. We have our bones that provide structure and rigidity. We have joints that connect those bones together. We have muscles that do the moving of those joints. And then we have connective tissue that holds it all together. So we have ligaments that attach bone to bone. We have tendons that attach the muscles to the bone and the joint. And then there's another connective tissue called fascia, and it's like a 3D network that attaches every single cell in your body. Now, to run this beautiful hardware system, we need a software system, and that's where our neural systems come into play. They run the show. So our nervous systems consist of our central and peripheral nervous system, the central nervous system being the brain of the operation, including the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which are the nerves that run from the spinal cord down the arms and legs to hands and feet. Now, there's also a somatosensory system, which literally means, somato means body, the body's sensory system. So it's the body's internal communication system to find out what's going on. We have 5 senses of touch and hearing and taste and smell and vision that help us make sense of the external world for survival. Well, our body needs to know where the limbs are in space, where we are in space, and that's where proprioception is the largest part of the somatosensory system that's involved in balance. So there are these little sensory receptors creating this body awareness, this sense of self. And as mentioned, it will tell when joints are moving, what position they're in, and these little sensory receptors are located in joints, the connective tissue, and muscles. So they have a sensory capability going on as well with these little embedded sensory receptors. So they sense what's going on. Am I climbing a rocky road? Did I just step into a ditch? It sends that information to the central nervous system and integrates all the information received so our body can create a muscle response. The muscles will contract based on the information provided. This, as you can see, is so important to stay upright and balanced, to help us coordinate, and for also agility. Now, I just want to do a little exercise so you can experience proprioception because it's a pretty complex topic and it's a complex system. So to just show how body awareness works, just sit tall in your chair or if you're standing and close your eyes. Take your right index finger and place it on the tip of your nose. If my webcam was working, we'd have a little fun by opening our eyes and seeing everyone with a finger on their nose because it's pretty easy to find the nose. Now close your eyes again and raise that left hand up as high as you can and bring that right index finger to the middle finger of your left hand. And you can open your eyes now. I'm sure it was pretty easy to find your finger. That's proprioception in action with respect to body awareness. The other role that proprioception plays is to sense and respond to the environment. So push away from your chairs if you're sitting. We'll take a little quick standing break for 30 seconds. Be next to a stable chair or table in case you lose your balance. And lift one leg So we're standing on one leg. You don't need to do tree pose, but just stand here for a moment for 30 seconds and focus on the foot and the ankle. You should feel that ankle going back and forth and to maintain your balance. This is proprioception in action. The ankle and the foot are saying, hey, I've reduced my base of support from 2 feet to 1 foot. I'm balancing on 1 foot. I need to contract and relax my muscles in my feet and my legs differently than when I'm on 2 feet. So that's how the body senses and responds to changing conditions. Okay, resume positions. That's proprioception. It's easier to feel it than to describe it with words. So like most things, since the body works as a whole system, proprioception does not work alone for balance. And balance is defined as the ability to maintain the center of mass over a base of support. The center of mass is a few inches below your belly button. Generally, it's about the top of your pelvic bones. And your base of support are your feet. Unless you are performing a handstand, then your base of support will be your hands. But kidding aside, the base of support are your feet. And our eyes, our inner ear with the vestibular system, and the somatosensory system all give the central nervous system input to maintain balance. And research shows that the somatosensory system is the largest and the most important system to maintain balance. Those proprioceptors that you just felt at your ankle play the leading role. And you'll be surprised perhaps to find that this role of proprioception is greater than vision. It's a much faster way to sense and respond to the environment. So now that we've taken an overview of a very complex topic called mobility, we're going to take a look at the anatomy of a fall and start connecting the dots with what we just talked about with mobility to the 3 phases of a fall. That include the event, the system failure, and then the ground impact. Phase 1 is the initiating event that causes the loss of balance. And you already know that balance is the body's ability to maintain that center of mass over your feet. And it's displaced beyond the base of support. It can be triggered by extrinsic factors or environmental hazards, including a loose rug, an unseen object on the floor, or an uneven or slippery surface. And then there are intrinsic factors that relate solely to the individual. Those can come from unstable or inflexible joints, weak legs, and poor reflexes. Phase 2 relates to a system failure and the inability to detect and correct the loss of balance in time to avoid a fall. The reasons behind it: a loss of sensory function. Many of our diabetic older adults have neuropathies, so they lost that sensation in their feet. They could have foot deformities like bunions or just an abnormal position of the ankle. Most of them have stiff joints that don't provide that proprioception to the central nervous system. They don't send those signals. Stiff joints have dead zones in them, so it prevents that sensory signal going to the central nervous system. So impaired processing at the central nervous system can also be to neurological problems. And then we have muscle weakness caused by sarcopenia and inactivity. So this might sound a little familiar to proprioception, where we're sensing and responding. It's proprioception that is detecting that loss of balance, sending those signals to the motor nerves for the muscular response that will be strong enough and fast enough to prevent a fall. But here we have a system failure, and that did not work right. Phase 3 is the ground impact, and that occurs when a person's body hits the ground. The potential for injury depends on the force and direction of the fall, and it depends on the strength of bones, soft tissues, muscles, and joints. And when we're performing weight-bearing activity or resistance activity, those soft tissues, the ligaments and the tendons and the muscles are pulling on the bones. That's where the strength of the bones comes into play. And that's one of the reasons inactivity is such a big culprit with falls. So looking at mobility and looking at those 3 phases of falls, we see weak legs are a culprit in phase 1 and phase 2. We also see the loss of balance as that initiating event and the system failure in balance. We've also saw that stiff joints, inflexible, unstable joints also play a role. And the primary causes for falls all come from the research that have shown over and over again for decades that weak legs and poor balance are a big part of it. And in about the past decade or so, starting to see more research on reduced joint flexibility. So what I'm going to share with you right now is by improving joint flexibility, we can increase strength and improve balance to reduce fall risk. Here's the science why. Better mobility begins at the joints. If we're moving, we have joints moving. That's the function of a joint. It allows movement. It takes those 2 rigid structures of bone, brings them together, and allows for flexibility. Muscles do the contracting, so they do the heavy work of the moving. We also know they're activated by nerves, because without nerves, muscles can't work. So we know that joints and muscles together provide a sensory and a mechanical role to help us move and for good mobility and to stay upright and balanced. Now, within each joint, we need a combination of stability and mobility. So joint stability comes from the strength of the ligaments and the muscles that surround the joint. This enables us to control the position of the joints, and it improves power. If we have sloppy joints, we're going to lose power, we're going to lose precision, and that can increase the risk of falls. There's a fine balance between the stability, the strength of the joint, and the ability of the joint to move freely and easily through that appropriate range of motion. So joint flexibility, as we defined, it's the ability to move joints through their full range of motion, and mobility is the action of the joint moving. So we want a combination of stability and mobility at each joint. And some joints perform more mobility, like the ankles and the hips, while the knees provide a function of more stability. When we work our joints through a full range of motion, we're actually improving the overall health of the joint. When we're moving, we're reducing pain and stiffness. This occurs because we're lubricating the joint with synovial fluid. You can think of it as oil for the joints. And you know, when you put oil on a mechanical device, it generally runs smoother. Same thing with the synovial fluid in your joints. The synovial fluid is the only substance that nourishes cartilage. Cartilage is found at the end of bones and provides that shock absorption ability as well as moving frictionless and smooth throughout motion. So if you're not moving your joints due to inactivity and aging, that cartilage will break down because it has no nourishment. The joint in general, when you're moving, nutrients are delivered, oxygen is delivered, so you can end up producing more energy. You're also removing waste because our cells all produce waste. Just like we do in our daily life, we produce waste, so do our cells. They produce garbage too. We got to get it out of the system, and movement is the best way to do that. When you're moving joints through that full range of motion, you're improving joint stability because you're strengthening the ligaments, tendons, and muscles that surround the joint. This helps create muscle balance, and that reduces injury risk as well. You'll experience better joint mobility because moving that joint through a full range of motion improves the way the joint can move. Training the joint through a full range of motion has a positive effect on strength. Strength relies on the nervous system's ability to activate muscles. As we're working the joint through a fuller range of motion, we're engaging all those muscles around the joint, not just some that we're using with walking or biking. We're engaging all of those muscles. When you engage more muscles, you gain strength. You also end up with joints that can move more freely, and when they move more freely, they can produce greater force. I like to equate it to an Olympian doing a long jump. You don't see an Olympian just taking 2 steps and then trying to jump far. That Olympian will, be way back and start running to gain energy to produce greater force. Same thing at your joints. This way you can move more efficiently, and you end up being able to produce force at any angle. And this is so important for fall reduction because you can't predict what angle or direction someone's going to fall in. If you've activated those muscles, there are neuromuscular connections and a greater ability to respond to that fall, that loss of balance in time. The joint range of motion has a great effect on balance as well. So we talked about those proprioceptors. They're also sometimes referred to as mechanoreceptors. They're located in and around joints, soft tissues, and muscles. They're stimulated by movement. So that's why activity of any kind is going to improve mobility. They're sensitive to changes in length. So when they're stretched, they're sensitive to changes in tension produced by muscle contraction. They're also sensitive to speed changes and joint angle changes. So when you're strengthening through that full range of motion, you're fully activating those proprioceptors that are essential for balance. That fuller range of muscle engagement means you're having greater sensory information sent to the central nervous system for processing for better muscle response. There's that fall risk reduction connection. Mobility starts from the ground up, and it starts with the ankle range of motion. So the ankles play a role in mobility because they're at the base of the kinetic chain. The kinetic chain are just your chain of joints. And you can see the chain working with our skeleton playing tennis. All the joints work together to produce movement. They talk to each other too. And one joint will affect the function of another joint. Since ankles are at the base of the kinetic chain, they affect all the function of the joints above. You can think of it as having a strong house foundation. And if your house foundation is strong, those walls will stay strong in general. If you have a weak foundation, no matter how strong your walls are, they're going to crack and they'll eventually fall. So you need to have a good foundation to build on. Pain at one joint can come from a joint above or below. So a lot of people complain about knee pain. It's often coming from an ankle joint dysfunction or a hip joint dysfunction. Being at the base of the joints, it affects posture because it affects how all the other joints can align themselves over the ankles. And research shows that ankle function is directly related to hip function. Remember, those two joints are the most important ones for mobility and movement. Balance connection. The ankles are lush with proprioceptors. The ankles are on the front line of mobility because the moment your feet and ankles touch the ground, they're activated. The ankles are activated. You want ankles that have good flexibility to sense what's going on in the environment and going on within the body itself. And then you want them to be strong so they can respond with the appropriate strength at the appropriate amount in the appropriate amount of time. You want them to respond quickly. This is critical for balance control. Ankles also play the main role and the first starring role to maintain and restore balance. We're going to talk about those strategies in just 2 slides. Being the research geek that I am, here's some, just a little bit of the research on ankle flexibility and strength being so important. Ankle flexibility is essential for posture, balance, and functional ability in older adults. Dorsiflexion. Those dorsiflexors are the muscles that lift those toes up when we're walking. That declines by as much as 50% in women and 35% in men between the ages of 55 and 85. And that's correlated with a higher falls risk. As mentioned a little bit earlier, a lot of older adults end up catching a toe and falling because of weak dorsiflexion. Programs that improve the strength and flexibility of the ankles and feet may help improve mobility and reduce the chance of falling. And that's what we've been seeing with our study results as well. So it all aligns. So the strategies we use to maintain or restore balance include the ankle strategy, the hip strategy, and the step strategy. These are unconscious automatic responses that we learned, our body learned probably when we were toddlers. And you can see here the ankle is the first line of defense once again. So when we meet with a loss of balance or a perturbation, our body acts like an inverted pendulum over the ankles. So here's where that ankle range of motion is essential to keep that center of mass over the base of support, those feet and ankles. The feet are the base of support. If the perturbation is too large or the ankle range of motion is poor, hip strategy is the next strategy to maintain balance. In the hip strategy, the hips will move forward or back to bring that center of mass over those feet. Without the range of motion there and the strength, our older adults go to the step strategy. And that's where they take a step, or we take a step, to widen that base of support so our center of mass is aligned and over our feet. You might notice some of the older adults don't use the ankle or the hip strategy. They only use the step strategy in response to a perturbation. That's a real signal and sign that their ankle and hip range of motion is poor, and that's where you need to focus your attention to improve their balance. Now, more specifically, research shows that the range of motion and muscles that affect balance decline with age, including ankle range of motion and strength, particularly those dorsiflexors that lift the toes and the plantar flexors that lift the heels. So those are involved when our leg is behind us and we're pushing off. So if you don't have strength in your plantar flexors and you don't have good range of motion at your dorsiflexors and strength there, your stride and your gait is going to suffer and become weaker. Inverters are the muscles that bring our toes towards the center, where you look more like a pigeon, And the everters help our feet go out to the sides, where you look more like a duck. And these muscles are also closely associated with maintaining that center of mass over our feet. Hip range of motion is also decreased, as well as hip strength. So the hip extensors, the muscles that bring the leg behind us, we're doing that every time we take a step. And the hip flexors, those are the muscles in front of the thigh at the top that also connect to the lower back. Those muscles help bring our leg forward when it's behind us as we're walking. Abductors are the muscles that bring the legs further apart, and adductors are those muscles that bring those legs to center. I see the abductors and the adductors weak constantly because to strengthen those you need lateral movement, and lateral movement isn't part of our repertoire in daily living in general. Internal rotation is also part of it, where internal rotation at the hip really helps support the pelvis. We want nice, strong muscles around the pelvis, including the gluteal muscles and all the ligaments and tendons and muscles. There aren't any. Let me back up a moment. So we want nice, strong gluteal muscles to support the pelvis. And you might notice with your older adults that most of them have a flat butt, which isn't a good thing because they've lost that power and that stability from the gluteal muscles. The muscles that extend the knee and flex the knee are quadriceps and hamstrings. Those also decline. The quadriceps strength is super important to be able to sit into a chair and stand up, both of those muscles. And then leg power. Leg power is the ability to move quickly. If we can't move quickly, we have a harder time avoiding a fall. When we have a half a second to respond to that loss of balance. So without the power to do that, fall risk goes up. All of this can seem pretty overwhelming to train, but with mobility training, it's a specialized form of resistance training that can strengthen ankles, knees, and hips through a full range of motion for better flexibility, strength, and balance, for better physical function and falls reduction. What you'll see with your older adults when you start doing and incorporating mobility training within your programming, you'll see them move better. You'll see greater independence, them able to do more on their own. You'll see a stronger body-brain communication. And when I start classes with a new group, oftentimes I'll see the older adults sitting there looking at their toes as they're trying to lift them and looking at their heels as they're trying to lift them because they've lost a strong proprioceptive sense. That connection between their toes and their brain is weak. And then after about 2 or 3 weeks, they don't have to look at their toes anymore. That's an indication of that stronger body-brain communication. So we know it works because we've seen the study results. And with over 10 clinical studies, just performing mobility training for 10 minutes, as little as 10 minutes once a week, we see improvements in better balance. The assessments used were timed up and go. So that's a measure of dynamic balance and agility, as well as gait speed. Gait speed is also closely associated with functional mobility. So reducing the amount of time it takes to get up and walk around 8 feet or 10 feet, depending upon physical therapists usually like the 10 feet, fitness professionals usually like the 8 feet. Get up, walk around a cone, come back and sit down. That time is reduced. We've seen it with a Biodex fall risk test, which is a completely objective measure. And this came from one of our research study partners in Connecticut who used mobility training once a week for 12 weeks, and they saw a 28% improvement in balance. A lot of our physical therapists use the Berg balance test, which is a pretty complicated test, but we've seen better balance with that as well. We've seen increased strength using the assessment of chair stand. So an individual will be sitting in a chair, get up for 30, get up and down as many times as possible in 30 seconds. It's a measure of leg strength, specifically quadriceps and those gluteal muscles, those muscles in the buttocks. Manual muscle testing of the quadriceps, hip flexors, and anterior tibialis, muscles all involved in mobility as well. We've seen greater ankle flexibility by measuring it with a goniometer. We've seen increased independence with reduced ADL scores based on the MDS 3.0, so reduced activity of daily living scores. And interestingly enough, a customer of ours who participated in one of our early pilot studies, I was able to observe the class, the restorative nursing class they were using it in, and the 4 folks in there were all wheelchair bound and had cognitive impairments. All of them reduced their ADL scores. So that goes to show you that the body has this innate healing ability and wants to be stronger. It just needs the stimulus to get there. Improved continence. This is self-reported. And once again, in one of the early pilot studies that was done locally, I was teaching class. One of the residents, Marge, came up to me later. She was 90 years old at the time, and she told me privately, "Kate, I'm not leaking anymore." One of our research study partners also shared that 3 of their 6 participants who completed the study expressed the same thing. And they would tell their friends at the community, "Hey, I've got improved continence," or whatever they said, and those folks came into the fitness center wanting to do mobility training. And continence is a big problem. It's 1 out of 2 women over the age of 65 have continence issues, so it's a big problem that's not talked about. But fall risk reduction coming from the stronger legs, better balance, greater ankle flexibility. And also, as people's abilities have improved, a reduced fear of falling. And with a reduced fear of falling, the chance and risk of falling is lower. Just like exercise training, the mobility training prescription, 1 to 3 times per week on non-consecutive days to allow for rest and recovery. Duration, anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. We've seen results in 10 minutes once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. You can increase that time. As you're increasing the time, you're increasing endurance. 1 to 2 exercises per major muscle group, so about 2 exercises for the ankles, knees, and hips. You also want to progressively challenge the body and brain. So the body and brain are both plastic, where they can change based on life experience to meet the demands that are imposed on them. That's how we adapt and get stronger. So we want to do it gradually based on the needs and preferences of our participants, because we never want to overwhelm them. We want to create that success experience. We progress also commonly by increasing intensity level, changing out the elastic resistance to make it harder to do. If you're using just body weight, you can change the intensity level, like if walking at a stroll pace or race walking, that's a change in intensity level as well. You want to switch up the program, because that way you'll increase the repertoire of of connections between your body and your brain. And about 8 to 12 weeks, you want to switch it up. For strength, it's 8 to 15 repetitions of each exercise in general. Endurance, a little bit longer, 15 to 20 repetitions. You can perform 1 to 2 sets. If you love doing sets of things, you can go up to 3, but the research doesn't support that 3 are any better than 1 or 2 sets. I think 2 is the magic number, but it depends on time. So the mobility training framework, these are the 5 simple steps you can take to address the components of mobility that we talked about. Strength, it's the foundation of all function. You move in a slow and controlled movement through You perform slow and controlled movement through a pain-free range of motion. So as we're moving through that pain-free range of motion, we're improving the joint flexibility and starting to just build a little bit of strength. Usually after about 4 weeks or so, the strength gains start to kick in after those neural gains. The nervous system has gotten stronger. Joint mobility, to move better, to enhance gait, for better balance. We move in a slow, moderate pace through a full pain-free range of motion. Pain is always the body's signal to stop. If someone complains about a range of motion hurting them, like their knees, we make the distance smaller. And if that doesn't help, it usually does. If that doesn't help, we reduce the resistance level. If people are in pain, the body and the brain is saying, this could harm my survival, and the muscles tighten up. That's the last thing you want to do. Joint stability, for joint strength, control the position of the joints, and for balance and power, producing power. We move at a slow to moderate pace, and we use intervals of 3 to 10-second holds at various joint positions. This will help strengthen those soft tissues around the joints by making them thicker and stronger. Power, for quicker reflexes, dynamic balance, to enhance daily activities and reduce falls. Falls happen fast. We need power to respond. We perform high-speed intervals for 5 to 30 seconds with a low intensity of activity to recover. And it's always as needed. Endurance, to walk, move, and stand longer and fall less. Higher repetitions of light intensity for longer periods of time. I've been using seated exercise to remove the fear of falling across the life continuum. You can also perform mobility training in a standing position with adequate support. While you're sitting, you sit tall, hips are aligned with or slightly higher than the knees. You move in that comfortable pain-free range of motion. Alternate between the big muscles surrounding the hips and knees with the ankle exercises. Rest as needed, take breathing breaks, and stretch to enhance flexibility as well. To experience mobility training, once again, you can use just your body weight. You can use a single elastic resistance band. You can use a mobility trainer. You can also use the small spree balls and whatnot and deflate those a little bit to help roll that ankle over it as well. So there are many ways you can do this. We always want to challenge the body, though. And this is a mobility training sampler. These are some exercises that hit those muscles involved in balance. So our toe and our heel lifts, lifting those toes affects the dorsiflexors and the plantar flexors as you lift the heels. Slide walking, and you can perform some of these while you're sitting in your chair right now too, or if you're, well, sitting is better. It helps just to have socks on to slide those one foot forward and pull the other back behind the knee for your quadricep and hamstrings. Toe and heel taps are an example of really tickling the brain when we lift the heel of one foot and the toe of the opposite foot and we switch. And this is another way we see where people are at with that proprioceptive connection. And there's a pretty quick learning curve, but at first people it can be a challenging exercise. You can try it right now too. You have to think about it. So over time when you see them doing it automatically, you've strengthened the proprioceptive system. Out and in to address the abductors and adductors and those gluteal muscles that fade away as well to help support the pelvis. And this can help with the bladder control.
Kate, I just want to interrupt just for a second and note that Kelly is going to show some of these moves when she does her demonstration afterwards. So I just want to let people know that.
Terrific. So just a sample. This is one of our exercise programs. So that's there for reference. Thank you so much, Robin. The Better Mobility Prescription, move more on a daily basis. You got to have activity in your life. You got to move it or you do lose it. Incorporate mobility training. Strengthen those joints through a full range of motion for better flexibility and strength. Walking programs. Change directions. Go forward and back, side to side, karaoke, switch it up. Of course, make it appropriate to the abilities of those participating. A lot of them need chair activity. A variety of activity. These activities can also be performed in a chair. Dancing, Tai Chi, Pilates. Keep it fresh because the brain and nervous system thrive on novelty. You're making new connections and you're strengthening the ones that are already there. When it's appropriate, exercise with your eyes closed because you're removing that visual system, strengthening the somatosensory system even more. Pace, slow to fast, when it's appropriate, of course, and the load, light to moderate. Heavy loads are strictly for strength gains, and research shows that light to moderate activity with joints that move freely transfer to activities of daily living better than just strength gains like on a machine. So to recap, the root causes of falls are stiff joints, weak legs, and poor balance. Improving that joint range of motion improves strength and balance of the body in general. Better mobility starts at the ankles. Flexibility and strength are critical for balance control for that proprioceptive system. Lastly, mobility training addresses the root causes of falls by strengthening the ankles, knees, and hips through a full range of motion to regain strength and balance, to fall less and live more. And now we have time for questions.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much, Kate, for all that great information. We do have a few questions that came through already, so I'm going to go ahead and read those. But otherwise, if you have questions, please feel free to send them in the chat or the Q&A features on the side of your webinar. So, Kate, the first question that came in, when someone has neuropathy, how does that affect proprioception, and can that be helped?
That is a great question. So neuropathy is damage to the nerves, and it creates the lack of sensation, and it usually starts in the feet. So any movement that they make, you're going to be increasing circulation, and you're going to be trying and pushing that nervous system, if it can be repaired, to the area that you're working. So nerve damage is kind of tricky where, you can reach a point of no return with the nerves. They can be so damaged that no matter what you do, you won't see help. But, and I don't know specifically about neuropathy and how the mobility training has improved that, but I got to tell you, exercise has systemic effects, and really working that ankle, you're going to have the best chance of recovering some function at those nerves. How much will be improved, that really varies. And just the last thing, being Miss Nutritionist too, if you've got people with neuropathy, get them off sugar, because sugar is so inflammatory, it kills nerves, and it kills your, it's one of the causes of neuropathy. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one. How do I get an older adult working on joint mobility when they have replacements or arthritis? What is safe?
That is another great question, because most of our older adults do have arthritis and conditions that can make moving the joints painful. So that's why, start out just with body weight and just get them, some of the exercises that were on the screen, you can use those just by sitting in a chair, just having them point their toes, lifting their toes, pointing those toes towards the center, pointing them out to the side. And joints, if you're going to do one exercise, joints love circles. So make circles with those toes. Do the alphabet writing. And this is something that older adults can do while they're watching TV. So just get them moving, because as mentioned, any movement is going to be beneficial. You're going to increase that circulation. You're going to bring nutrients and oxygen to the area. You're going to be releasing that synovial fluid, and that pain and stiffness, it will become reduced. And it really depends on the individual practicing movement consistently. We can't put fitness in the bank. It's got to happen on a daily basis with just body weight and engaging in more physical activity that's appropriate for the individual. But by starting in a chair and getting those ankles and sliding, the feet forward and back, opening those legs up out to the side and in is a great way just to increase the circulation and start building some flexibility and strength in those areas that you're activating. Did that answer the question, Robin?
Excellent. Yes. Thanks, Kate. So a couple other questions that came in. One of them is about the slides. Everyone is asking for them, and the answer is yes. We will be sending out a copy of the slides of this presentation in a follow-up email tomorrow, so you can be watching for that. And then someone asked where we can get the resistive trainer of the ankle showed in the slides. And please stay on the line. I'm just going to go through a couple little logistics about the webinar, and then we're going to be having a demo of the resistive trainer, and Kelly Sullivan will talk a little bit more about that. So let me just quick check to see if we had any other questions. Otherwise, I think we're going to one more, Kate, sorry. What % would you guess each balance system plays in the ability to balance?
So research shows, most of the times people think, oh, my eyes, my eyes, my eyes. But research is showing it's the somatosensory system, and particularly proprioception, because that's the biggest part of the somatosensory system that plays a role in balance. It's the main guy for balance. And the ankle proprioceptors, they can respond much faster. Like if you see with your eyes that your field of reference, you're losing your balance, that's not going to help you sense and to respond to that fall. So it's the somatosensory system, proprioception, that is the main system that will help prevent a loss of balance, that keeps us upright and balanced. And it occurs constantly throughout our day. This is why we can move around quite easily. It's because of our proprioceptive abilities. If we didn't have good, strong proprioception, we'd kind of look like a heap of Jell-O on the floor, not knowing how to coordinate our legs and arms and our body in general. So it's the proprioception that is key for balance and the coordination and agility that we perform on a daily basis without ever thinking about it.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Kate. If anyone else has other questions, we are going to just take them via email, and we'll answer your questions via email after the webinar. As a reminder, by attending this month's webinar, you'll receive 1 nursing contact hour, 1 physical therapy contact hour, 1 occupational therapy contact hour, or 1 complimentary administrator CEU approved by the NAB. To receive your final certificate and contact hour credit, you'll need to take the follow-up survey that will be sent in the email tomorrow. I'll also put it in the chat area so that you can take it right away if you'd like to. Please note, if you're watching as a group, you must each fill out the survey in order to receive your certificate. The survey is given to confirm that you attended, and then also get your license information so we can send that certificate. And now for anyone interested in learning more about the mobility trainer solutions that Direct Supply offers, please help me welcome our fantastic product manager, Kelly Sullivan.
Thanks, Robin. So today we're going to be talking about some equipment that is portable, that you can utilize with a resident that is more dependent, maybe sits for longer periods of time, and that actually provides resistance as it pertains to muscles that are needed for stability and flexion, and the ability to actually motivate that person to go from a seated to standing position eventually. So the first product I have here is the Move More, which Kate had alluded to throughout her presentation today. The Move More is a unique product in that it is a platform that uses multi-directional resistance as you can see as I move my feet around here and I can lift my feet, that is going to offer up to 30 different exercises for your staff to engage with the resident. Whether that be in their room, whether that be in a classroom setting, they can use this equipment with residents that may not make it down to the gym or the wellness gym for that matter. But what it's doing is it's allowing the flexibility to bring the product to the resident to encourage them to engage those muscles needed for balance. The product itself has various different resistance options here. So as you can see in these bags, there's different stretchy bands that connect to the foot platforms that allow for various different resistance. So if I have someone maybe starting off, they haven't worked out in 20 years, I might use the light option versus the heavy duty. So I kind of look at it almost like TheraBand. It's that spectrum of resistance that you're going to be offered here with this product. And at the very end, after talking through a few exercises, I'll show you how to disconnect and reconnect those resistance bands. The exercises, like I mentioned, there's up to 30, but there's 10 in particular that really do work on helping with balance and flexion and motion within those lower extremities that Kate kept talking through during her presentation. So we're going to focus today on a few of the Take 10 to Move More exercises that will be shared with you in the email that's going to follow the webinar. So let's talk about, first of all, ankle flexion. And ankle flexion we know is needed for proprioception and balance. And so a few of those exercises that Kate developed will help with that flexion. So for instance, if I engage my feet in a toe lift exercise, now I'm working dorsiflexion. Maybe I want to work on plantar flexion, so now I'm going to go engage that with a heel lift. Another exercise for range of motion would be the ankle O's. So I'm moving my feet around here in circles, or I'm going bidirectionally. Or in any of these activities, I can just concentrate on one foot. So if I just want to increase strength in one area, I can do that as well. So it can be customized to that individual's need. Another activity that we generally see in this space is a toe fan. So I'm moving my feet in and out, and I'm working on inversion and exversion. All right. Next, we're going to talk about a few exercises that really work towards increasing muscle strength in your quads and your hamstrings, opening up some flexion in those knees. So these are going to be some bigger movements that are going to really engage those larger muscle groups. So the first one I'm going to show you here today is the slide step. So I'm really going to push those legs in and out. So I'm sliding forward and back. And this is giving me really targeting that quad. I can feel that as I move my feet here. Another exercise I might look at is a double kick. So I'm going to kick my legs forward and I'm going to pull them back. Kick them both forward and then pull them back. Another activity that you could work with a resident on is the merry-go-round, and that's just a simple circle around. We're moving our feet in a complete circle around the board. Or I can go bidirectionally once again, targeting different muscle groups. All right, and I do want to touch on abduction and adduction as well. Those tough to get to inner and outer thighs that are needed for lateral stability. There are some exercises that work really nicely for this particular activity. So one being, it's called the in and out. I'm simply going to slide my feet in and out, moving my feet together, moving them out, moving them together, moving them out. All the way in a safe seated position. So I don't have to work out on a major piece of equipment in the gym. I can do this in the safety of their own room in a seated position. Another activity that I could engage those abductor muscles would be the cross step. And that's simply just a midline cross step where I'm crossing those feet over one another. I'm really feeling it in my inner thighs right now. So those are a few that you can work on for lateral stability. And last but not least, I'm going to talk to another more dynamic movement, which is a march. So I'm going to be lifting up my feet, and I'm going to be kicking that foot forward a bit, because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to really work on my hip flexion. So I can feel that in my hips, opening up that hip and working to increase strength around that hip. Again, also needed for lateral stability. All right, so those are the activities that we're going to show you today. Of course, there's plenty more where that came from, and we're happy to share those activities with you via PDF or phone call or however you'd like to engage with us. I'm going to spend the last minute on this particular product before I move on to the next product, just showing you the resistance bands and how easy it is to change them out. And as you can see, I'm wearing tennis shoes. Ideally, you don't want anyone in heels wearing this product. That makes a lot of sense, obviously, but tennis shoes or even like socks would work fine too, just as long as their feet are flat to that surface. So all I do is I turn these little green knobs here, and it says locked, unlocked. Pull off the foot plate, and here you can see the resistance tube, and it literally just locks right into place there. And it's as easy as that to change out those resistance bands. So I can use this board with multiple different patients. It's not that, okay, once those bands are in, they're in. You can use it from room to room with many different types of patients and with different needs and different ability. So that's the Move More. Very exciting product. And affordable and portable, which is kind of the theme of today. The second product we're going to talk to you is from a company we work with called Shuttle Systems. This is the Shuttle Mini Press. It's a product, again, that is very portable. It's on a roller system, so I can move it quickly and easily down the hallway to a resident room. I can stow it away in a closet. It's about 15 pounds, so it's not very heavy to even lift if I'm putting it into, let's say, a trunk or into some kind of storage space. The interesting thing about this product is that it's going to give you multiple different exercises. So I'm going to lift it up here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. You can see how it's engaging many different types of residents, whether they're in a supine position or they have a little bit more strength and they're able to stand and engage in some other activities. So for example, I have a resident that's recovering from a knee surgery or even a hip surgery. If I put a bolster underneath their lower back, I can engage those muscles in a supine position and actively have them put their foot here, secure it with the strap, and have them push against that resistance up the board. The more resistance they're going to feel is based on how far they can actually push that board up. We have a starting resistance with the red band here of 2 pounds. The rest of these have 5-pound increments and a starting point, but I'll show you the red. So the red, we're at a 2-pound starting resistance. As I engage that muscle and I push up that track, you can see along the side here, the pounds increase up to 10. So the further I stretch that leg, the more resistance I'm going to feel. I'm also going to be able to measure how far I extend that leg. So I have a progression, a measurable there. I can show that I've increased the ability to extend that leg, but also that I've increased resistance along the way as well. As that person gains strength, I can add another band, and now I'm adding an additional 5 pounds to that exercise. So now starting resistance is 7 pounds, and as we increase and push, we can get all the way up to almost 30 pounds of resistance. So what this all means is that the range of resistance is from 2 pounds to 80 pounds, so it's a very wide scale spread in terms of resistance. I can activate those muscles needed for that you need to condition for recovery from a post-op situation. Maybe I'm working with the person on abduction or adduction. So what I would do is I would put this on the ground. The person would be standing holding against the wall or a chair. They'd place their foot across their body here and push that leg forward. And now I'm engaging that inner thigh. Or maybe I'm putting my foot on the outside and I'm placing it here. Now I'm engaging that outer thigh. Or if I want to work on hip flexion, my glutes, I'm going to stand behind it. I'm going to put my foot behind and press and push back. Maybe I want to target some muscles in the upper extremities, particularly your pectoral, and increasing pectoral strength for falls. Also good for arms. from a recovery from a CVA. So all I do is put it on a table, and now we're pushing as much as that person's able to. So really great product. Once again, affordable, portable. They have another version of it I'd like to quickly show you here. That is called the Mini Press Lite. And all it is, still gives you the ability to move this around the building. Typically utilized more often in a home health setting because of the fact that it's got a smaller footprint. It's just a little bit easier to move around because it's lighter in weight. Still can engage in the same activities that I just mentioned. Both machines have the ability to change flexion. So as you can see here, I'm changing the board in terms of where I want that foot placement. And both have resistance, so as well as measurables built in, so I can record how that person's progressing over time. Resistance does change on this one. It goes from 2 pounds to 50 pounds versus 80 pounds of resistance on the Mini Press standard. But still, both are very great tools to include into your program, your exercise program at your building, especially if you don't have a lot of room for those big pieces of equipment, or you don't have a designated space for maybe a treadmill or a bike or what have you. This is a great tool to move around the building. If you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to email me. You'll see my email on the screen here in a minute. I'd be happy to jump on a call and talk to your staff about some other possibilities and how to use this equipment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for that great presentation. One question did come over for you. Could you remind us what those last two products were called, please?
Absolutely. So the last two products I showed were through a company called Shuttle Systems, and this is the Shuttle Mini Press. The yellow one is the Mini Press, and this is the Mini Press Lite. It's just a smaller version of the larger version.
Perfect. Thank you. If you have any other questions about the products discussed, please reach out to Kelly. Her information is on the webinar screen. Otherwise, like she said, feel free to reach out to me as well. For more information about upcoming webinars, please visit directsupply.com/webinars. Once again, thank you for attending today.